We talk to the legends of the creative and entertainment industries. We talk to those on the rise. Lance Dean Anthony Nielsen asks about the highs, the lows, and everything in between. This is Outcast Creative, and this is Industry Interviews.
Good evening, and tonight I've got a very special guest with me. My second guest from the world of music, you might say, or clubbing culture. I've said it before on the channel, and I'll say it again. Aside from music itself, the creation of a clubbing event, clubbing environment, clubbing culture as we've come to know it, acid house raves, everything going through to drum and bass. There are a huge amount of creative elements that go into creating these things. And no one knows the history of this scene better than the guest that I'm bringing in this evening. He's got a fantastic new book out called Rave New World, the link of which is both in the chat already and down below if you want to check it out. And that is the legendary Kirk Field. Thanks very much for coming, Kirk. Welcome to the Outcast Creative.
Thank you, Lance. That was some introduction. What was that clip from? Reach for the
so that clip at the very beginning was from Human Traffic, and I posted that clip for all the kids watching at home, saying that you know, don't take drugs. I do want to talk about films a bit later that have covered this scene that you know so well, and I want to get your opinion on them. Now, before we sort of jump into your specifics, I'm going to ask you a load of really quick fire questions. I just want you to give me the first answer that comes into your head.
You sure you want that?
Yeah. If it's a segue into a big story that you want to tell, pause on the story and just let me know I've got a story about this.
Okay. For the viewers at home, we've not rehearsed this. I don't know what he's going to say.
No, absolutely not. And the more organic it is, the better. And the reason this is it's just to give my viewers an idea of your own relationship with the culture that you were brought up on. Okay, so here's the first one. What's the first ever song or track that you can remember as a kid sticking in your head?
Blockbuster the Sweet. You better watch out. No. You better take care. You better watch out.
Yeah.
Black hair. It was the glam rock era. You're allowed to talk like that.
Sure. First TV show that you remember that you had to watch as a kid, no matter what. Thunderbirds being the one for me, for example.
The Champions, because of Sharon McCready or Alessandra Bastido, the sultry house secret agent.
I've got a story about Bastido, actually. I
Really?
can tell you that. Yeah, I'll tell you that. No, nice one. I'll tell you that about another time. First movie you can remember seeing in the cinema when you were young?
In the cinema, not on the tape TV.
No, on the big screen. What was the first thing your parents let you go and see? Bambi on re-release was.
I guess it was like something quite saccharine, like Disney's Jungle Book or something like that.
Okay, that's all good. Standout television series or mini series that you've seen in the last 10 years that you would recommend to other people to watch?
It's got to be Breaking Bad, isn't it?
Excellent choice. First single, vinyl this would be, you ever remember buying?
That was Blockbuster the Sweet.
Okay, great. First vinyl album you ever purchased or had bought for you?
That was a punk band called The Boys. I bought it in 1977.
Okay, have you still got it?
Yes, I have.
Excellent. Where and when did you first go clubbing in the UK? Very first nightclub?
Oh, the first nightclub would have been in Barrow-in-Furness, where I grew up in about 1979. And we used to hitch it through on a weekend. And it was just when the post-punk thing was happening with a Scar and new romantic seeds were just starting with the Model by Kraftwerk and stuff like that. The electro scene in its infancy. So you used to go down to a place called Maxim's in a typical provincial nightclub in Barrow-in-Furness.
Right. Do you know what that building is now?
It was originally the public hall, but I haven't lived around there for many years. But it did turn into another club called Scorpio One. I don't know if Scorpio One's still open. Any viewers watching from Barrow-in-Furness, please let us know. But yeah, that was a thing. But that was like how I cut my teeth on clubbing. That was the nearest nightclub, and then from there we'd go away to Manchester or to Liverpool. Always hitching a ride on the Euro. Didn't have any money for the trains.
As a punter, what was the first club in Ibiza you ever went to?
First club in Ibiza I went to was Pasha. But in 1990, January 1990.
And I believe Pasha's still going, isn't it? I believe.
It's still going. It's an empire now. It's an empire. There's about 26 different franchises all over, and it's not the farmhouse it used to be. It's still a very high quality club. The aspect of it is still very good, but I like that organic feel of it. It was an old finca. It was an old Spanish farmhouse with stairs going up and different multi-split level, typical sort of Spanish setup, and it was completely impractical to get around. And you go on the roof, and there's all these beautiful people hanging out in the roof. But on a certain time, when the wind blew in a certain direction, the sewage farm used to bring all the smell of an aroma of human excrement. So everybody's there looking absolutely gorgeous in dripping in designer gear, and it smells like a sewage farm. They never tell you that, do they?
No, that's quite funny. What dance track? No matter how far you might be located from the dance floor in a nightclub, will have you dashing like a mad bastard to get to the nearest space to cut some shapes back in the day?
The list was endless. I mean, I was a Rave Reporter, so I started.
Give me a couple of examples.
Frankie Knuckles, Your Love, French Kiss, Little Louie. I used to really like Ra La Lana's Real Wild House, Promised Land, Joe Smooth, KLF, What Time Is Love, all those classics.
What Time Is Love is that's an awesome.
It's almost like adrenaline made into music. Is that motive, that recurring motive, which then.
So I want to start with. Okay, those are the quick questions. There you go. So it was nothing too bad. Just to give us an idea of your sort of cultural journey. I want to start with, I guess, the acid house scene in. Which really kicked off in the UK in the late 80s, which kind of had its emanations, its birth in the Chicago acid house scene. And the first thing I became aware of it was I was working at a cinema in Kingston upon Thames in Surrey, and one of the girls there, called Charlotte, came in on a Saturday morning to work, having been up all night, and she'd been to an acid house rave, and she just came in shouting acid, and she had all these yellow badges over her with smiley faces and all this, and I thought, what is going on here? And that was my first knowledge that these parties even existed. We were all sort of standing around her, hearing these stories of this party she'd been to in some warehouse in London, and that was 1989, I believe.
Years
it might have even been 88. It was either 88 or 88.
Probably ahead of the game. I mean, it was happening in 88. I mean, I was quite a late comer to it because I was in a band. As I explained in the book, I was in a band. So in 87 and 88, I was too busy being the next Billy Idol or Bono.
Right.
Really sort of quite self-obsessed, and as a front man, it was all about me, and I danced to look good. To look good rather than to feel good. It was all very posy in the 80s. You'd go to the Limelight and off Shaftesbury Avenue, and everybody was like a clone. They were all dressed in MA1 jackets. They all had Bros haircuts, which I've still got, and they had faded 501s torn on the left knee, and then they had grolched bottle tops through their shoes, the shoelace holes on their shoes, and everybody looked fantastic, and nobody was enjoying themselves. They were just leaning against a pillar and posing and pouting with a bottle of pills, and it was like a temple of misery and despair.
Right. So what was your, let's say, transition from that to going towards acid house? Was there something that instigated that, or how did
Yeah,
it
I mean,
start?
this is the first chapter, which I'm not going to talk too much about.
No, and by the way, if I don't want to cover stuff that's in the book necessarily, but so don't go too far down that road, and you can sum these things up quite quickly if you
Yeah,
want
so
to.
suffice to say that I got a job as a barman. As my mates had a mobile bar unit, and the idea was that they were going to service 40-year-old and 50-year-old ladies having their parties in Temple Fortune in London, or bar mitzvahs, or posh people's birthday parties in their own gardens. And the first call I took was for a party for 4,000 people that started at 12 and finished at 6, and they didn't want any alcohol at all, and they couldn't really tell us the venue until sort of 24 hours beforehand, and which didn't make sense at all, which didn't make sense whatsoever. We worked it out. We thought, we know what it is. We figured out what it would be either a kids' party for a royal family member who's got 4,000 people and no alcohol, or we thought it might be the wrap party for the Batman movie that was being filmed at the time at Pinewood Studios.
Yeah, the Michael Keaton one.
Yeah, and we thought, okay, it's just finishing. They're just finishing filming it, because we knew someone that worked on the set, and we knew for a fact it finished like the week before, and so we thought it was a wrap party for that. And I, as I say in the book, I couldn't go out that night. I was taking an ex-girlfriend out to meet Lemmy instead. He's from Motorhead. So I spent a night clubbing with Lemmy, and it was my last rock and roll night out for many, many, many years. And because when I went back on the Sunday, my flatmate Adam was in there, and he was playing this weird music off this weird radio station with a radio presenter that sounded like he had a sock in his mouth. Keep it locked. Here we go. I was like, what on earth is this? What kind of music's this? And he came dancing to the front door, and he goes, "Oh, mate, it wasn't a rap party. It was one of them acid house parties. It's everyone's taking this thing all day. There's brilliant music. Everybody just loves everybody else. It's going to change the world." I thought, bloody hell, what I've got to check this out. What on earth is he talking about? And so the next Saturday, we went out to a club called the Dungeons, Lee Beach Road, which is a famous seminal rave club, acid house club. And I went in there, and I took ecstasy for the first time, because I was anti-drugs until then. I was quite clean, sort of, well, by clean, tax drugs like alcohol was allowed. Sure. But I was a bit of a low, actually, because my band had split up, and I was going through a real sort of, what am I going to do with my life? I failed. I've tried to be a pop star for the last 5 years. It hasn't worked. My band had split up. My relationship split up with my girlfriend. The German police took all my money for reasons which you'll read in the book. And so I was really at rock bottom, that I was really needed a new direction and something else to come into my life. And it came in bang on cue, and it just completely possessed me. And I just loved the unity. I just loved the feeling of belonging, and it was non-judgmental. It was completely different to everything that I was doing with, oh yeah, well done, that's the Dungeons flyer. And it was a complete antithesis to everything I was doing as a singer-songwriter, frontman, stroke wanker in a band, because it was all about me. And of course, when you're in a rave situation, you dissolve, you surrender yourself, your individuality, into the greater mass, which is the crowd, which is one body of people. And once you've experienced that, you never forget it. And so that really took my life by the scruff of the neck and give it a good shake. And so I found my life has changed. And so every single weekend through the summer of 1989, I was working behind the mobile bar unit at the biggest rave of that weekend, like Biology or Sunrise or Energy or whatever it was. And so looking back on it, it was the best summer job you could expect to ever land. And it was completely unplanned. And I found myself being shocked by the coverage in the newspapers on the Monday morning. So whatever party we went to on the Saturday night, which more often than not started on Sunday morning or even Sunday afternoon sometimes, because of the cat and mouse games, which I explain in the book. Then we'd get back about Sunday tea time, about 7 o'clock, early Sunday evening, and we just crash out. And we'd wake up the next day, and this regime was the same. we'd go down to the local Greasy Spoon Cafe in Mill Hill East, and we'd pour over the papers. And on this particular morning in late June, we looked at it and went like, uh-oh. And initially we were really excited because it was the front pages of all the papers was all about the party that we'd been to, the party that we worked on. And our excitement soon turned to dismay and anger at the lies and the mistelling of facts that was in there. And so that is what inspired me to start writing for Mixmag. I'd done no journalistic training whatsoever, but I didn't like the fact that the scene that I was loved and I was part of, that I saw so much good and so much positivity involved with, being misrepresented in the press by journalists who had an axe to grind, or were probably under the pay of the government or the police or the establishment, basically, who wanted to stamp this out. And Acid House was seen as a folk devil. It was a new thing that couldn't be encouraged under any circumstances. And so they told lies about it, like people still do when they don't want you to like something. And I was, for a while, it felt like I was the lone voice railing against the mighty circulations of the Sun and the Mirror and the Star and the Express and even the quality papers, the Independent and the Guardian. They didn't write positive things about the orbital raves. There was only really Mixmag and the NME that did that.
So, I mean, how difficult was it to, because you start off on this scene as a punter. First of all, you're working the bar on some events, you said, and now you've become a journalist. How difficult was it to do that job and function in any given week and avoid sort of, because you'll be wanting to party and kind of, because you don't want to be on the outside of the mass looking in. You want to be part of that sea of people.
Absolutely.
Is that quite difficult to juggle?
Yes and no. Yes and no, because it wasn't. I didn't think of myself as a journalist, so that helped. I was a raver that wrote. That's what I did. I was a raver that wrote about it. So I didn't go in there with a press pass or have any journalistic friends or aspirations. And so first and foremost, I was there to sell the water and the Ribena. And the second reason I was there was to party, because we'd do the shift and then we'd go off and party. And then thirdly, I would go back and I'd write it up. So I wasn't stood at the side of the dance floor going, oh yes, Carl Cox is playing the extended Joey Negro mix of, I wouldn't be doing that. I'd be just dancing to it, but I'd make mental notes in my head about which DJs were doing really, really well and what tracks were the biggest tracks of the night. Because that's an instinctual memory. I don't have to. Sure. It's an emotional memory rather. But I can tell you a story actually that really sums up the problems of being a raving reporter, like a gonzo reporter, and actually living it, which kind of sums it up really well. So it's New Year's Eve, 1989, and we were in the Panasonic warehouse. Some of our colleagues had broken into the Panasonic warehouse down in Slough, and we were dancing in there. And there was a pile of bricks and breeze blocks in there, and we were dancing on the dance podium, which was a big pile of breeze blocks. And this DJ came on, and he was slaying it. Every mix was just smooth as silk. And after about half an hour, I was like, everyone's looking around. Every mix he's doing, the level's going up, it's going further. So I said to my friend Sarah Jane, who was next to me, I said, who's this DJ? Who's this DJ? So of course we looked like this. And it's not like these days where the DJ's on the center of the stage. Back in the day, the DJ was on a trestle table behind the stacks. He wasn't the star of the show. He wasn't the focus of the show. He was the facilitator. And so he was in a little trestle table. And there's no backstage passes, because why would you want to go backstage? All it was wires and some technicians drinking coffee or rolling a spliff. But it was boring. There was nothing there. The sound was awful. So you wouldn't want to go backstage. And so we didn't know who the DJ was. We could see his figure. And I said to Sarah, look, we've got to find out who it is. And so she said to the guy next to her, who was dressed in like dungarees and snorting a Vicks stick, and she said, who's this DJ? And he kind of squinted and peered, and he came back and went, blah, blah, blah. And she went, all right. And she continued dancing. And I was like, well, did he tell you? Yeah, he did. I said, well, who is it? And she looked at me proudly and said, it's DJ Roof Rack. I went, fuck, DJ Roof Rack. He's a new one. But the scene was evolving to such a fast pace that new names would come up all the time. You know, I mean, but and I prided myself because I did the first interviews with KLF for Mixmag on KLF, the Orb, the Grid, the Shaman, Moby. Wrote about Ibiza for the first time for Mixmag. So I was really ahead of the game, and I prided myself on being first. So I was like, right, I'm going to do the first interview with DJ Roof Rack. And so at the end of his set, which just got better and better, I went over to the trestle table where my mate Simon was stood, and he's like stood guard on it, like a security guard. I said, all right, Simon, go Kirk, Happy New Year. I said, yeah, Happy New Year, mate. I said, any chance of having a word with Roof Rack? He said, who? I said, Roof Rack, the guy that's just been playing. He looked at me and went, Kirk, that was Groove Rider.
No, like Chinese whispers, they misheard the name. I'm guessing
in a Panasonic warehouse without any kind of sound regulations. It was just metallic. You know, you can understand how Roof Rack can be misinterpreted for Groove Rider. If you looked at but anyway, luckily he told me who it was. Otherwise, Mixmag would have carried a really good review of that party. You're in that photo somewhere. That's from that night. That's right. That's from that night, and that's the dance podium that I was talking about of bricks. Yeah, it was a fascinating party. There's some really good stories in the book in there. That's the party that I think they raffled a BMW. Loads of mad stuff happened. Was it fixed, or was that a real raffle? It was a real BMW, but you'll have to read the book to find out that. But so yeah, it was like a wild frontier. You know, it was mad things were happening, and because we didn't think it was going to last, because the police kept on telling us, the papers kept on telling us, it'll all be over by Christmas. As soon as the weather breaks, it'll all be over. And so we kind of lived. You know, there's that saying that says, "Live every day like it's your last." Yeah. Well, we partied every single weekend like it was the last one, because we thought it might be. We thought they might change the rule overnight, or the law overnight, or the weather might crack and break, and we'll never ever do this again. So we partied every single weekend in 1989 like it was the last weekend. But what happened over the course of that summer, and this is important because this is a creative aspect of it, is it's almost like there's a film, you know, the film The Dirty Dozen. Oh yeah, when they have favorite movies. Yeah, they have all these mavericks that aren't wanted in other army units, and they're all ne'er-do-wells. They've all either got thrown out or they're on the last warning, and they all get together and they make a really good team and create something amazing. Well, that was what working on the 89 Raves was like. You know, the video guy, the guy that does the visuals, the sound guy, the security guy, logistics, the convoy, the bar person, everybody that worked on as promoters, the fly-in teams, the ticket sellers, all of these, we created a new industry and we got really good at it. And those people that I worked with, I'm going to name check them now, Adam Proto, he was signed up, and he was signed up corporate wise, and he one of the things he did was when Pepsi Cola wanted to relaunch as a blue color rather than a red color, Adam came up with the idea of going to Red Square and painting it blue to tell the world that Pepsi Cola was now blue. So, you know, it was all the kind of mad stuff that we used to do in 89, except now he's got a budget. Daz Jameson, who did the visuals, he was one of the first VJs. He's now out in Dubai or the United Arab Emirates. I don't know which, I think it's Dubai. And he works for the royal family over there, doing huge spectaculars, which include like 72 white stallions riding through a 4-inch acre of water to get the water splashing up, and laser shows with drones and all of this kind of thing. These guys cut their teeth on the illegal raves in 89. Me, you know, I wasn't a journalist. I started writing about these things, got to the stage where I ended up writing for Time Out, and writing for national newspapers, writing for the NME, writing for lots and lots of respected organs of press through no journalistic training, just writing through passion, because all I had was 2 fingers and the truth. And, you know, just to be able to write with passion what I did. And I think that it created a different industry, because everybody now that goes to, you know, the whole festival culture, I think, was kick-started by the 89 race.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely.
You look at Tomorrowland. All Tomorrowland is Sunrise with a bigger budget, and they've got a license, so they can do like a 6-day build or 7-day build. Whereas we had 6 hours to build sometimes. But we paved the way. That summer, I cannot underestimate how important it was, not just culturally, but for the creative industries, because it showed a different way of doing things.
And back then, I mean, for the benefit of those people watching this later who, are younger than us, you have to understand that this is in a time when you were lucky you would be extremely rich if you had a mobile phone, and it would be the size of a brick. You might have a pager, but basically you had ring around teams, didn't you? For when because it was important that the police didn't know where a rave was going to take place until as late as possible, if at all. So everybody was on a phone number chain. Do you remember that? And you'd get a call from someone, and someone would have to call someone else, and someone would have to call, and you'd have people organising convoys of cars to go to locations. And
it was, I think Ken Tappenden, who was the divisional commander of Kent Police, who they drafted in to head up the pay party unit, or the acid house squad, as we called them. And Ken was an old campaigner, right? Ken was no slouch. He bent the rules already by stopping Kent miners from going across the Rotherhite Tunnel, or whichever one it is. He set up roadblocks, and he shouldn't do that, to stop them secondary picketing. And so he'd already shown that he would bend the rules, and it needed someone like him, because we were bending the rules and trying to exploit the law as much as possible, looking for loopholes, and it needed someone equally as adept and as creative and imaginative about his approach as Ken did. I mean, Ken already will admit now that quite a lot of what they did wasn't right, wasn't legal, but he knew he needed the same approach as we had. But he says, looking back on it, he says, the amount of people that we moved around, that the Orbital Rave promoters moved around in 1989, was shocking. They couldn't believe how we could move so many people, 10, 15,000 people around from one part to another part, without giving out the venue until the very last minute. And they were very impressed, and also very scared by that, actually.
Yeah.
They brought I did a Freedom of Information request, and I've gone up to the National Archives office when I was researching the book, because it's not just acid house anecdotes and me taking too many drugs. There's other things in it, as well as a social history aspect to it, which I wanted to get right, because I didn't want it to be misrepresented like it's done by some other commentators. And so one of the FOIs that I put in is indicated, it's backed up, the claims of someone I spoke to who works on the raves, who said he's always maintained that he knew for a fact that MI5 were interested, the security services were also involved in that clampdown, something that's never been officially admitted. But looking back at the documents that I've unearthed, you can see there that, reading between the lines, the Thatcher government said that the police can have whatever they need at their disposal. We'll give them an increasing amount of tools, whatever they need to do the job. This is all political parlance for the security services. They're never going to say, if you want to call the boys from MI5, they'll help you out. But as I say, I've got it on record that somebody who I trust, who I worked with, says to me he knows for a fact, because, and this is a great story, because his mum bumped into an old school friend of his in the motorway service station, or that place in Kent. What's it called? That Greenwater, or what's that big shopping place? Blue Water.
Oh, yeah. The one down in the southeast. Oh God, I not Meadowhall. It's the same as Meadowhall in Sheffield, but
it's Blue Water or
Blue Water. Yeah, it's my idea of hell is what that place.
Well, she bumped into this lady, and they had a coffee together. And this old lady let slip that her son, she's very proud, her son was working for MI5, which she shouldn't have even known in the first place. But she said that, and then sort of 3 months later, they bump into each other at a motorway service station, and let's call him P, said, Ian, what are you doing here? And Ian said, I'm just passing, mate. And he wasn't. He was actually MI5 on the ground observing what was going on. And then that's never been officially admitted, but they got very good. The police got very, very good. You speak to any of the rave promoters Jeremy, Tintin, Tony Colson Hater, Tarquin, they'll all tell you they were ahead of the game in May and June. And as soon as you got to sort of mid-August, the police were on top. In September and October, they were busting raves left, right, and centre. They were really on it. And there's no way that a little group, a little office of 8 people, eight policemen in Kent would be able to get that kind of effectiveness.
There's your man Ken Tappenden himself.
Yeah, he's now I think he's a master of ceremonies now. So obviously we've impressed it. We've obviously influenced him. So now he's an MC Ken Tappenden. Oh,
yeah. So I mean, there's a few sort of pivotal points in rave culture, clubbing culture history, if you like, that I want to pick up on, and some of them you were directly involved in. Others I just want to get your opinion on. One of those is that you were instrumental in organising the first legal rave in the UK, if I remember rightly, with quite an impressive lineup as well.
Yeah, that was Rain Dance. Actually, the very first one they did, I wasn't in
Rain Dance. Thank you. Yeah,
I wasn't involved. I was actually filming. It's on my website. It was actually ravenewworld.co.uk. I was actually filming for a documentary because I wanted to be well, my manager at the time wanted me to be a TV presenter, and so we put together like a showreel for MTV. And so I did a thing called a 13-minute film called All Stressed Up with Nowhere to Go. And so I went out on a Saturday night in October 1989, and every rave I went to got busted. So I went down to Brixton Academy, that was busted. So I ended up talking to the police. Then we heard through the grapevine of that's just the images, but there's actually a video section on there. So, it's on the same kind of section, but it's a video called All. Here we go. All Nowhere to Go. Yeah,
and the link, by the way, everybody, is already in the information below for Kirk's website. Very comprehensive, loads of info in there. Do please go on. Sorry.
And there's and so we heard about this rave going off down over in Barking, and so we hot footed it with a camera over to Barking, and we got there, and there's like loads of police outside. But luckily, the policeman I'd been talking to at Brixton Academy had given me a press form, to say that because you're filming, I told him I was filming for my PhD or something like that. And so I was able to get in to this rave that had been busted that had like a ring of steel around it. And it's quite a famous interview, actually. I went in there and I got talking to a couple of the lads that were still hanging around there, one of which turned out to be a guy called DJ Slipmat, who's since gone on to become a legend of the scene, is now known as the godfather of the hardcore scene. Of the rave scene, and he was just a young sort of 19, 20-year-old kid with a ponytail and a denim jacket when I started speaking to him about it, and they said that they'd got a license to do this rave, and the police still busted it. And so I called up the office on the Monday. I called up the Rain Dance office, and they'd heard of me. They knew I was Kirk Field from Mixmag, and they said, look, we need someone to do our press because we can get licenses, we can make this legal. And so I started working for Rain Dance late 1989. And then I worked for them all the way through till 1995. So we pioneered the licensed rave party. And that it's really important, and it gets overlooked, but because it wasn't fashionable at the time, because it was Essex breakbeat rather than Boyzone, Four to the Floor, House and Balearic, which is going off done by Terry Farley, Danny Rampling, legends like that in the West End, which there's nothing wrong with. But it was almost like the scene had gone on. And so it was like breakbeat. So it's like things like suburban based records, a band called The Prodigy, SL2, Shades of Rhythm from Suffolk. And it was like young kids doing stuff. And so along with the DJs, Slipmat, Lime, Ratty, all of those people, Dr. S. Gachet, LTJ Bookham, and now Carl Cox, looking back, that was the start, that was the cradle of the drum and bass scene. That's me.
Was that you on the microphone?
That was me doing. That was me holding the microphone.
Yeah.
My job was to pump up that big blue ball that we threw onto the crowd. I was also stage managing as well, which was a lot of fun. So I do anything. I do the guest list. Then you do stage managing. And it was just fantastic. It was a great thing to be involved with. It was a brilliant team, and it's still going now. A guy called Richard Siggins now runs Rain Dance, He was one of the original crew that worked on it, and it's still going. I think it's Fabric. I think they're doing Fabric in a few months' time. But yeah, that was the original. That was the sort of the frontier time when we were the only ones. For a while, we were the only legal rave organisation in the country for a while, and the Eclipse got our license. But that's different because that's a town centre venue. But we were a tent with a fairground, with a stage that we built, with DJs coming to visit, and that was really pioneering stuff. So I was really proud to be involved with that. And for the first time, I'm able to tell the story of what happened when we did a rave in a bull ring in Marbella, which makes the Fire Festival look like a children's tea party as to what went on there.
That's in the book, I take it. That story.
Yeah, the first time, Marbella Madness, chapter 12. I was able to tell the first time because everyone was so shocked at what went on. I think we've all had PTSD. We all kind of put it at the back of our minds, and then I thought, okay, it's time to finally get it out and tell the story.
Yeah.
Of the rain dance rave in the bull ring, which is some really funny stories. In fact, it could be a film. In fact, you as a director should read that chapter, Lance, because that's a movie in itself. It really is.
Well, we're going to come on to movies in a little bit, but before we get there, so again, for people that didn't live it, there was a determined effort, and I got into the rave scene and after all this later than you, but there was a determined effort by the Conservative government at the time to not only clamp down on this new explosion of clubbing culture, but also to criminalize it, prosecute people, demonize it in the press, and so on. And they were doing much the same thing to you can parallel it with the underground sort of first indie horror filmmakers that were all being labeled as video nasties, which many of these films are now kind of considered to be sort of cult classics like The Evil Dead. You know, you wouldn't get Mary Whitehouse going to too many rave events. So in the sort of we go into the 90s, and you know, rave culture really took off. Were you conscious of the criminal element that started permeating it in terms of struggle for territories and stuff like that? Was that something that became apparent with you going to events? Did you ever get a sense of that happening?
Yes, I did, but I was always kept away from it. I was
sure.
I know that, you know, I'd go. I mean, I was going out 5 nights, 6 nights a week, because by now I'm not just working for Rain Dance. I'm also, you know, writing for Mixmag or DJ Magazine or Ministry. I got my own column in TNT Magazine, which means I had to go out. I was writing for Time Out Magazine, doing some of their clubs stuff as well. And so I was out 5 or 6 nights a week. And so there was times when I remember one party I went into in Palmer's Green. It was Palmer's Green, and I went down the stairs. I went past, did my usual. It's Kirk Field from Mixmag, you know, showed them a little pass. It means I didn't have to pay to get in. And so I went in there, and about 20 minutes later, you could just sense the atmosphere just change. Everybody stopped dancing. Everybody's like looking at each other, and I'm like, what the fuck's going on here? So I was trying to meet a DJ down there. So I wanted to check if the DJ still arrived. So I went back to the box office, and I just said, and this guy just looks at me, completely different people in the box office. He said, "What do you want?" I went, "I just want to know if Nicky's down." He was, Nicky. I said, "Nicky Holloway. I'm supposed to be in from Kirk Field from Mixmag." Just fuck off. Just get in the club. I said, "What?" He goes, "Just get in the club. Get in the club." I said, "Well, all right." So I went off there, and I went on the corner. I was like, "What's really strange? What's going on there?" And then I saw this guy in tears, and he was the promoter. And he said, they've just taken the box office. Some guys have just come in with guns, and they've just taken the box office. And it was his night. It was
right.
So they literally come in with some shooters, sat in the box office, and were going to take all the money. They could take all the money. As soon as all the money were in there, they were then left with all the money. So this kind of thing started to happen. And you know, I think that there are other people with other stories to tell. Skullduggery was going on because it was unlicensed. It was cash rich. And whenever you have an industry that's cash rich and unlicensed, then you're going to get that element. You're going to get that element in there. I mean, at the time there was one flyer I saw. I remember seeing this flyer, and someone gave it to me and said, the IRA are behind this. Now, whether or not that was true or not, I don't know, but I remember exactly what flyer it was. And I was like, really? Right. And so, so initially there was 2 or 3 really good, like World Dance, Sunrise, Energy, Biology, Genesis, those are the big 5. And then other people started coming in and doing things you'd never heard of. And it got quite disreputable because it got to the stage where, in fact, with Rain Dance, it got to a stage where people wouldn't trust what we were saying. I'd write the flyer copy, like people wouldn't trust those Rain Dance flyers because other people would be advertising Frankie Knuckles or Junior Vasquez or people like that. And Junior Vasquez, we knew for a fact he wasn't in the country because he was scared of flying. And he played in New York on the Saturday, on the previous Thursday, and it would take 5 days to get across the Atlantic on the QE2. So we knew for a fact that Junior Vasquez wasn't booked. And yet 2,000 people had turned up to see Junior Vasquez, having paid 25 quid for a ticket. And of course, these blogs had just disappeared. So the rave scene was getting a really bad reputation. So we had to do something about it. And the answer came to me on the 6 o'clock news when John Major, do you remember John Major? John Major?
Yeah, UK's most boring prime minister.
Yeah, so John Major came up with this idea of the Citizens' Charter, right? It's like usual Tory huff and bluff. It amounted to nothing, but it sounded good. And so in the Citizen Charter would mean that you would get a certain quality of standard from your public services and from, if you get your bin emptied and the police would respond in a certain amount of time and you get an ambulance within a certain amount of time. And that went well, didn't it? And so I decided to do the Ravers Charter. All right. So I came up with the Ravers Charter. I took it into Rain Dance the next day. They loved it. I said, yeah, let's do it. And so we printed the Ravers Charter. I took it down to the Daily Star. And I managed to get a full page. They actually reprinted, like those medieval scrolls. Well, they reprinted it. And I wish I'd kept it. If anyone out there has got it, please send it to me, or at least a photograph of it. But I got a full page for Rain Dance in the Daily Star. It's unheard of. But the serious side to it was that we said, if anything that we offer on the flyer, if we don't give you, we'll give you a suitable replacement, as good, if not better, or we'll give you an element of your money back. We'll give you like £5 back for everything that we don't deliver. So we put ourselves in a situation whereby if we didn't deliver the laser, or the headline DJ didn't turn up, or there wasn't a space age theme, someone could claim 15 quid from us. Now, the fact that the tickets were only like 20, 25 quid, that takes all our profit away. So that kept us, not like that we needed, to be honest, but that set the benchmark and goes, right, we'll see who else can do this and make sure it's Ravers chartered. And so when we heard about raves being put on, we would then ring these rave promoters up going, excuse me, mate, your rave, your lethargy on there next Saturday. He goes, is it Raver chartered? Is it covered by the Ravers Charter? No, mate, it isn't. All right, then we're not going to go there, thanks. And so we would literally try and almost bully people into joining the Ravers Charter because that guaranteed standards and quality for these kids who are parting with their money, who deserve to get down, or to stop people from advertising things on the flyer that clearly they couldn't deliver. So, I did my bit and Rainers did our bit to keep the scene straight and to keep the scene kosher and reputable.
Did you, was there a sense of, I see this a bit in the indie filmmaking scene in London now, with various creatives, that there can be room for collaboration and cooperation occasionally. I wonder, for example, like Terry Turbo of One Nation events, who we both know, was doing similar events around the same time. There's a few videos of his stuff on YouTube. It's quite weird looking at him back then. Was there a sense of cooperation from other promoters to embrace the stuff you've just been talking about?
Well, there was with Terry. Yeah, Terry's Diamond. He was fine. I think we worked with us on Rain Dance as well. He was part of it. He was fine. He was kosher. But there's always cowboys, isn't there? There's always cowboys, and that's why we brought that Ravers Charter in, to make to flush them out, to show that they, if you're gonna advertise a certain DJ, make sure you deliver him. It's getting crazy. I mean, at the time I came up with this. There's an artist, a flyer artist called Pez, really well-respected flyer artist who did all our stuff for Rain Dance.
Yeah, I heard of him at some point. I can't remember why, but definitely.
I think his Instagram is Pez London on Instagram. He's a really talented guy, and I hooked up with him recently after many years, and we're still working on this project together, which started in 1991, and it involved me writing the flyer copy, which is almost like a satirical flyer, and we called it Deception. And it listed some weird and wonderful things. So instead of SL2, it had SL3, in brackets, even better than SL2. And then it had something like the Prodigy playing with a 72-piece orchestra. And it offered it advertised all these crazy things. In actual fact, the Prodigy playing with a 72-piece orchestra, probably something that could happen these days. But back in then, it was just it was bonkers. And so we put all this together, and Pez started doing the artwork for it. And it's a long story, but it didn't come out. It never saw light of day. And so I hooked up with Pez recently, and we're going to finish this Deception. That's it. Yeah, we're going to finish this Deception. There he is. We're going to finish this Deception flyer, and we're going to present it as it's the flyer that's taken the longest time to produce. Right from 1991, we're finally going to finish it in 2024, which must be some sort of record. Yeah.
I mean, this is a good example of, this is what I mean about this industry is just full of all this creative juice, and it takes a meshing of music, artists, designers, and also promoters who are creative in their own way, bringing it all together, almost like a director, really, to make these events happen. And because what everybody's looking for in an event like this, even now, is a unifying experience, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm glad you brought some stuff up there by Pez, because Pez is a great example of someone who, I mean, I interviewed him. I wrote his bio last year, and for that I interviewed him, and he tells this great story that he went to the Astoria one night to it was, I don't know who was it was probably Nicky Holloway's night, Sin or something like that. And so he came out all sort of saucer-eyed and shimmering and covered in sweat like everybody did. And someone handed a flyer to him, handed a flyer to him, and he got the flyer and he looked at it, and it said, I think it said biology, and he looked at it, he put it in his pocket, and then got it out again and looked at it and went like, this is shit. So he went back to the guy and said, is this your party? The guy goes, yeah, that's right. He goes, your flyer's shit, mate. He goes, what? He goes, you could do much better than this. You do much better than this. The guy goes, tell you what, here's my number, give me a call. So I think the next day, or after Pez had slept, I think he went into the office and said, like, I want to do you can do a lot better than this. Instead of printed black and white, photocopied, boring stuff. Let's use psychedelic imagery. Let's use, mystical imagery. Let's use fractals, the whole thing. And so, Jarvis went, okay, yeah, you guy from biology, yeah, okay, go ahead, do it. And so that's how he started, and so Pez ended up doing so many of the flyers back in the day. It was incredible. His work rate was like phenomenal, and he literally tells a story how he used to turn around a flyer every 24 hours. He'd be a good person for you to interview on this, I think.
You know what? I was just thinking that, and I actually remember this image, which he used variations of this on a few different flyers. The Pez spider. Sure, I've seen it before. Sticks in your head. It's like something creepy out of War of the Worlds.
I mean, he basically, I think without stealing his thunder, because it's a good point to make because it's creative channel. But I think the point he made, he said his approach was there, just like DJs through hip hop would sample anything. Nothing was sacred, yeah. So you take a drum break from James Brown, or you take some strings from some Bulgarian folk music or whatever, and you put it in and you make something new with it. Well, that's how Pez approached his art. So he'd take Dadaism, surrealism, psychedelic imagery, mystical traditional imagery, whatever it was. He'd remix it. He'd remix images, and it was completely in keeping with what was going on musically, and which is also what was going on VJ-wise. It's what you speak to Cold Cut or Daz Jameson. That's what they were doing. They were just mixing in old Laurel Hardy tracks with Wizard of Oz or whatever it was, kaleidoscopic images, whatever. You know, they would just do anything. Suddenly it was all up for grabs, and you could sort of thieve and steal anything in the name of art.
There you go. There's a biology flyer there of his.
Yeah.
From back in the day. I want to ask you about representations of this scene in film and television, which of course is something that greatly interests me. And there's been a few films over the years. Of course, we had a clip from Human Traffic at the beginning. I've asked Justin Kerrigan to come on this channel, actually, and I had a lovely conversation with him. But as you may well know, he got completely ripped off making that movie, and it wasn't a pleasant experience for him. So he's tried to kind of put it behind him. There's been some other good movies, and there's been some so-so movies. We've had things like It's All Gone Pete Tong and the Harry Enfield, you know.
Yeah.
I mean, that was quite fun in its own way.
That was good. I mean, I think the thing I liked about Kevin and Perry and It's All Gone Pete Tong, and my book as well, is that in club music, darling, it's a disco. People are enjoying themselves, right? It's not a battlefield. They're going out there to relax, let their hair down, and socialize and get loose and get high maybe, and it's fun. There's a lot of laughs there, and I think sometimes it's very easy. There's still certain segments of the dance music press who haven't reviewed my book, haven't touched my book, because they think it's too light-hearted, and it's a bit sort of, it's not doesn't revere the scene. Well, actually, it does revere the scene, but they're not in the way that they like, because they're completely humorless the way they think about things.
Sure.
You know, like, you know, there's certain websites with, and it's all about the BPM and sort of techno DJs in black t-shirts and all looking with 5 o'clock stubble, looking really meaningful. And, you know, it's a laugh. It's a laugh as well. You know, I talk about the music and the importance of that and the cultural heritage of it, but I also include some really funny stories in there. I've got a quote from Carl Cox this morning, which is brilliant. He said there's some great old rave stories in there, and it really made me giggle. And that's fantastic, you know, because I want to do that, because people look back on that, and as much as yes, you remember the first time you heard French Kiss in a courtyard in Hackney, and the heckles on your spine just rose, and you were in love with life for a second, and you suddenly got that connectiveness and that universality. But also you remember you lost your mate, and you finally found him outside, and he was dancing to the Air Extractor fan for 45 minutes. You know, and you talk to me, oh, there you are, shut up. This track's brilliant. And so wait till the track's finished before you talk to me. You have to go in 10 minutes, you know. And so, you know, the funny things like that happen. And I think that's really important to capture that. And I think that those films you talked about, Pete Tong, Hold On Pete Tong and Kevin and Perry, sum up the kind of humor that's involved in that scene as well. I think Human Traffic does it brilliantly. Yeah,
Human Traffic is, for me, is the film that sort of defined that era. And the funny thing was, it kind of came out in many ways after that era was kind of done, or at least that the 90s part of it was wrapping up, because Human Traffic came out at the end of the 90s. Something I want to ask you about historically wise, but before I do, one of my moderators kindly found this, which we think might be your Ravers charter.
Oh yeah, that appeared in Rave Mag, and that had elements of it. That's about the only thing that I've found on it as well. But what I'd really like to do is find the Daily Star page that had it in full. It had it in full, but there's elements of it in that, which is great.
I think it's quoting sections of it, and well, there you go. My people are on it, man. They're
very good, but also
Melvin.
Well done, Melv. But also it shows that it actually happened, because when I finished writing the book, I read it back, and I thought, I've got one problem here. People just aren't going to believe it. People are just going to think it's a work of fiction, because anybody that's read the book, you know, the kind of things that's in there. You've got assassinations, world leaders, or you know, when I become a Rave Reporter, and Mixmag started sending me around down to different countries, like half of the book takes place overseas. You know, there's chapters of Tunisia, there's 2 Russian chapters. I went to cover the first rave in Russia. There's Ibiza, of course, there's Marbella, Croatia, Germany, Goa in the new edit for the paperback, and so there's loads and loads of travel stuff in there for for when the rave scene expanded, and so that's an important part of the book as well. I think the fact that watching it as it went across the planet, I had a ringside seat for that, which was, I feel very honoured now looking back on it.
Yeah, that I mean, you have put yourself in quite a unique position, almost. I mean, a parallel I can think of, it's a bit of a weird one. It almost feels like your Doctor Who. Your TARDIS popped up at different key points.
Yeah,
in this story.
Do you know? It's funny because Mixmag reviewed the book, and they reviewed the book, and they called me the Forrest Gump of Clubland, and I think it's really accurate title, because I'm always there at the pivotal moments. When the Berlin Wall comes down, death of Diana, the fall of the Soviet Union, the Serbo-Croat War. When I was in Tunisia, what happened in Tunisia, you'll read in the book, is a real pivotal time, and through not by design, but purely by accident. I can't work out whether I was in the right place at the right time, the right place at the wrong time, or the wrong place at the wrong time. I guess you'd have to read the book to tell it. But going back to what I was saying earlier, I had a bit of a doubt that I thought, well, this is all true. This all happened, but people aren't going to believe it. People are just going to think it's far-fetched. And maybe people do think it's far-fetched, but it happened. I was in all those places, and all those things happened. It was bonkers, the 90s.
Yeah. I want to ask you about something a little bit more serious, and I mean, I am aware of how the media and the press were manipulating things at the time, but a seminal moment in kind of 90s rave history was the death of Leah Betts, and for anybody who knows the full facts of that story, there were a few high-profile ecstasy deaths, but she actually died from overconsumption of water, which her friends panicked. She was overheating. They gave her lots of water to drink. And sadly, if you do that and somebody's consuming too much water and they're not getting rid of it, puts pressure on the brain, things can happen. And that's what happened. It was a tragic event. But I would say that event was, as tragic as it was and awful as it was weaponized to a degree, because I remember that immediately after that, there were very heavy prison sentences given out to anybody who was caught dealing, etc. There was a massive clampdown, in particularly in the Essex and East End part of London with the club culture. And then, of course, not that long after that, you had the high-profile Range Rover murders, which have been the subject of a number of films. Did you feel the impact of these events? I know you were not limited to those areas. You were organising events all over the UK and abroad. And so
I did, because I was so to answer that question. So I was also a performer, because obviously I said at the start of the show, I used to be a singer in a band. And it got to a stage where I invariably found myself at raves introducing the DJ, because I was about the only person that knew about mic technique, because all of the MCs were going 1, 2, 3, and they didn't know about mic technique. So mic technique is when you go, ladies and gentlemen, tonight, and you move the microphone further away, the more output you put in your mouth. If you want to whisper, you put it very close. So I was able to use mic technique quite effectively in order to get messages over. The messages could be the party's over, or the new DJ is called this, or he's not called Roof Rack, or even something like, please move to chill out area, or there's been a fire escape, there's a fire been reported, or whatever. So I was like a safe pair of hands. So as much as though I was a stage manager, quite often it'd be my voice in the microphone that tell people the party's over, or what exits to use. And so that was seized on by somebody. And to cut a long story short, I ended up becoming a member of Hyper Go-Go, and also to a thing called the Ethics, to the beat of the drum, bang, to the beat of the drum, bang, bang. So I ended up fronting those two acts and going around the country doing PAs in 97 and 98. In fact, one of the chapters tells about my desire to be on top of the pops and my approach to it and how I went about getting on top of the pops to fulfill a childhood ambition. But one of the nights that we were doing this, I think it was the night after Rettendon, or maybe it was 2 nights after Rettendon, when the Range Rover murders, and we had a gig in Canvey Island. We're playing a club in Canvey Island, and we went and did the show. And again, it was one of these things, everything was really tense. Security were in a really funny state of mind, and everybody was in a kind of a state of suspension. There was only about half the people at the club, and it was a really weird atmosphere. And afterwards, I went in to get paid. It was explained to me by the assistant manager that we couldn't get paid because the police had taken all the money from the safe, and we weren't allowed to get paid. So I said, I need to make a phone call. So I called up my agent at the time and said, look, and she always used to say to me, you never leave without getting the final 50%, otherwise we'll never see it. And so I rang her up, and Jodie Sharp, bless her, God rest her soul, she passed last year, really tragically, and she was an amazing champion of mine, and a lot of people know her in the scene. So Jodie,
she was your agent.
Yeah.
I think long blonde hair.
Yeah, that's Jodie.
Yeah, I met her. God, in like the early 2000s.
Ah, really?
Yeah.
We had lots of matches together, me and Jodie. But anyway, Jodie just said, just everything's cool. Leave. Just leave now. Don't cause a fuss. Just leave. And it transpired that the owner of the club, or the manager of the club, and half of the security had been arrested and put into behind bars as part of the Rettendon murder inquiry. So that's how it affected me. It was like no one knew what was going on, basically. And we got paid in the end, and the people that were involved in that club were found not to be involved in those murders, I should say.
Right. Yeah. It was like a seminal moment. There was a bit of a kind of
and
it was over at one point.
I think this leads us on quite nicely, Dan, to talk about the drug thing, because as much as though my book talks about the social history and the humor, I also in a couple of chapters address the drugs debate, and we should have that drugs discussion as a society. And what I say, and in all my spoken word shows, I always do a piece on this as well, because I support testing. I support something called The Loop. We are theloop.org. And they are the guys who do testing at festivals and events and on the streets of Bristol. They're doing it every Saturday, I think, in March. And you can take your drugs to them, and they tell you what's in those pills. They'll tell you, which is really useful. It's really, really interesting, really important to know what people are taking. Because back in the day, it used to be very simple. There was one batch of E's in it with either Doves or California Sunshines or Mitsubishis or whatever it was. And it's like everyone knew the characteristics of that pill, whether they were strong, whether they were weak, how pure they were. But these days, there's a huge amount of pills on the market, and also a lot of them aren't ecstasy. You've got a lot of synthetic opioids now. You've got a lot of so-called legal highs that people are putting in there, which is cheap to manufacture. And the Chinese who are flooding the laboratories keep on taking one step ahead, because no sooner do the British government make it illegal to have that, they'll do something with one more molecule, which is called something else. And so they find a way around it that way. And so what I'm saying is, I'm a parent of two children, two boys, one's 17, nearly 18, and the other one's 22. And so this is important as a parent. It's all very well talking about the old days, and we all got a bit spangly eyed and stuff, but people did die. Why did Leah die? Leah died because lack of education. She had I believe her father, God bless him, gave her water, thinking it was the right thing to do, and gave her too much water. So education is really important. I pressed for that in Mixmag. I got them to do articles on ecstasy about how to take it, how not to take it. I remember one time I wrote about you've got to have potassium. Make sure you have lots of potassium, because if you on MDMA, it sometimes strips the potassium and the nutrients from your body. And so the next day, at Brixton, my mate did a rave at Brixton Academy, and they came out, and the stalls were just setting up on a Saturday morning, and everyone had read my article and made a beeline to the two fruit and veg stalls and bought them out of bananas. So So by 8 o'clock in the morning, there was not one banana to be had on the whole of Brixton Market. And the market traders were like, I've got no from my no. They couldn't not sell them bananas, you know. They couldn't not sell these kids bananas. But that was brilliant to know that, you know, they were my articles were being read. You know, people did want that education. And I'm a firm believer in just say no, spelled KNOW when it comes to drugs. You know, you can tell people not to take them. You can tell silly blue in the eye, but people are going to take them because that doesn't work. And I think that because the culture that we live in at the moment is a very much a culture. It's an adventure culture. We say, just do it. One life, live it. Taste the rainbow. So there's all these strap lines sensually imploring us to push boundaries and things. So we push boundaries in travel. You know, life's too short. Have an affair. You know, you've seen all these kind of things. Live in the moment. Treat every day like it's your last. But don't take drugs. Well, you can take drugs, but take tax drugs. Take alcohol and take tobacco. That's okay. But don't take drugs. There's no consistency. It doesn't work. Prohibition doesn't work. And so that's why it needs a different approach. And that's why I speak about this whenever every opportunity I get. And a percentage of my profits from the book, if there are any, is going to go to the loop to put something back and to further the case for drug testing.
Have you read any studies? Because, of course, they've been doing this in Holland for a long time now. And of course, they have a very different attitude towards, you know, some drugs over there. And of course, it's also a massive clubbing culture over there, huge, especially with young people, huge parties. I've always wanted to go to one in Holland. I've never managed it yet. But, you know, I just wondered if you have ever looked into the statistics of, you know, how they compare, because I know, you know, they're on it with sex education, for example, and they have the lowest teenage birth rate per population in all of Europe because of their sex education.
Yeah, I mean, you can look at those statistics. Those statistics are out, I think, on the Loop website. I don't want to cherry pick them now and get the wrong thing. But
no, sure.
I think the takeaway is that the big argument about drugs testing that the establishment say is that it encourages people to take drugs. It doesn't. The research has shown that it doesn't. If people are going to take drugs, some people want to experiment with consciousness or with spirituality or whatever. Some people are always going to take drugs, no matter what. So you've got to make it as safe for them as possible, whilst at the same time educating them that, you know, if you're going to take this, it can go two ways, and it's not sustainable, and it should be recreational if you're going to do it. But if you ask yourself why you're taking drugs, what you're trying to run away from, is that something you can fix as well? You know, so. You know, there's an education aspect to it, but yeah, I think it's important to say that the Loop's own statistics show that people testing does not make people more likely to try something. I think that's what they found.
No, I don't think there's any data to back up the contrary to that. I would agree with you.
And you know, one thing about drugs, even if you take a pill, you say, oh, I've got this pill, I took it to the testing thing at the back of the hall, and they've said it's pure MDMA, it's absolutely fine. Well, you can still be allergic to MDMA, or you can still overeat on it. You know, it's not safe taking anything. People die of peanut allergies. People are allergic to potatoes. So inevitably, some people are going to be unable to process certain drugs because so it's always a risk. It's always a risk when you take something, but you just got to measure that risk against the greater good. And I think with MDMA in particular, there's a lot of interesting work being done on PTSD and couple therapy, because that's originally how it was used in the 60s in America, and it was used to bring couples together. In fact, I tell a story again in the book that it nearly wasn't called ecstasy. I spoke to someone who imported a huge amount of it at the time in, and they were really concerned about calling it ecstasy because it was known as a gay drug. The gay scene used to have it in San Francisco and also in Ibiza before anybody else started, because Ibiza's always been quite a mixed thing, especially in those days. And so it was seen by some people as a gay drug, and so they thought it might have negative connotations to use in the straight market, and so they were going to call it empathy because it is empathetic. MDMA is empathetic.
That's interesting.
If it wasn't for for an advert for the best-selling women's shampoo at the time called Empathy, then
God, yeah.
you Google that, empathy ad. You can get that. It's part of me show. I put that up there. And that girl is wearing empathy because you're worth it. But that was on those adverts were on every single advert break, and so you know you can't call it empathy. Well, why? I said, because the fucking shampoo's called empathy, so it was called ecstasy.
There's a couple of topics we haven't covered. I'm conscious of the time, but if we can, I'd just like to talk about these briefly. One of them is there's a big section in the book about the holidays that you organised, basically under the label Radical Escapes, and these were holidays for clubbers to go to places like Ibiza or to go to places in Europe to experience the clubbing scene that they hadn't experienced before. Are you still doing that? When did that wrap up?
Yeah, I mean that starts at the end of the book actually, because this book, Rave New World, is from 1890 to 99. And the book I'm currently writing, just finishing off actually, is from 99 to now.
So there's already a sequel on the way.
Yeah, Planes, Trains, and Amphetamines.
Ah, yeah, that's right. Yeah, you mentioned that before.
And that's basically all the stories of me organising trips. It was the UK's first independent clubbing holiday company, and it was set up as I was inspired by after I went on a 20s holiday to Ibiza, because it was the cheapest way I could get over there for 5 days to promote my record. I had these white labels, so I bought a last minute 20s holiday, and it was just awful. I just looked, I thought, this is terrible. These cheeky chappy reps are just completely out of touch with what's going on, and they're selling like Nobly Knees competition, wet t-shirts competitions, and taking people to really poor discotheques when they could be taken to really cool nights that were going on. And so I just thought there's another way of doing this. There's a package holiday. Package holiday as a concept works really well in terms of you bulk buy in, you've got power to be able to buy decent, beds or club tickets at a knockdown price. But not have a welcome meeting at 10 o'clock in the morning, because people are either still up at that time or they've just gone to bed. So I never have welcome meetings. So I set up this thing, a 10 commandments of running a travel company, like not having uniforms. You don't have reps in uniforms, cheeky chappy uniforms with 3/4 length trousers. That's me in Ibiza in 1990 after trying to interview Brigitte Nielsen, which unravels spectacularly, as you might guess. So I'm still doing Radical Escapes. We do a thing called Ibiza Trance event every September, and we take a few hundred kids out there, and I take the DJs, and the DJs play at some of the biggest clubs. I'm involved in the Kevin and Perry night annually at Amnesia. So that's a good thing to be involved with. And also Paul Van Dyk's closing party. And so I still work in clubbing travel, but the majority of my time now is spent promoting and working on the book and my writing, because at the age that I am, it's time for me to stop riding around Ibiza on a scooter at 3 o'clock. I've done it. I think I've done my time.
Just in London, we kind of went from the 90s rave scene. We kind of moved into clubs like Bagley's, the Aquarium, these kinds of places. And I know we both had entertaining Dave Courtney stories where the God rest his soul, where the Aquarium was concerned. What would you say in the decade of the late 2000s, going into where we are now, but pre-pandemic, what would you say principally were if you could think of three things, what would you say the three main things were that have changed the clubbing cultural landscape in the UK, London specifically, but you can talk about it more broadly?
So the first thing's really obvious. It's mobile phones. As an old raver, I've got to have me say, you're not living in the moment. It's all about the moment.
I couldn't agree more. I was at this Martin Kemp thing the other day where he was DJing, and as soon as he came on, it was like 200 phones up in the air, and I was like, oh man! And these are people that were pre-mobile phone generation, so that they should know better.
I mean, I feel sorry for these kids that are, you go out with a group of friends and you find your favorite tune comes on and you're there, your eyes closed, and you're really going for it, or you might be pulling a funny face. And the next thing is, that photograph's there on Instagram, and it's all so enjoying themselves. It's like, you're going to look like a fool. That means you're probably not going to relax the next time you go out, and you'll be on there just like I was in 1986, like the rest of the twats were, posing because it's important to look good rather than feel good. And so it's a step in the wrong direction. So there are club nights which say leave your mobiles in the cloakroom, or not get your phones out, which is great. Which is more of that, please. I think the second thing is polyuse of substances. So in the past, it used to be very simple. Everyone was on the same buzz. Everyone was on E. And then, of course, as the 90s went on, it got to coke, which is not a really good drug for unifying people. It's all about
it's a good one for starting fights normally.
Easy individual. But then of course, in the time you talk about, the pre-pandemic time, you got the rise of, or it should be the fall of ketamine. Which again is not a very social drug. It takes you inside rather than outside. You don't want to be with everybody else. You want to be inside your K-hole. And so that's the second thing. And I think the third thing is just the music. The music was nearly 20 years old by 2008, 2009, 25 years old. So it was getting to the stage where it was, they started to use samples of old tunes, but then put breakbeat underneath it and reinventing it. But it really wasn't as dynamic or as cutting edge or as fresh as the.
They were kind of diluting it.
In
a way. Yeah.
And EDM. I mean, the rise of EDM. EDM. If for those people, it's American. Americans finally managed to make dance music popular. So it's really late and I'm tired.
That's all right.
Popularized dance music, and they did it. They did it because by making, if you look at a good house tune, will flow. So it'll start off, and then after about 40 seconds of the kick drum, and then the hi-hats will come in, and then maybe the bass comes in, and it brings up, then it goes down to drop, then it comes up again. Whereas EDM is almost like, right, we'll have 30 seconds of that, then we'll have a break, then we'll have a drop, and then we'll have a build, then we'll have a drop. And it's almost like, instead of having a 3-course meal, it's almost like you just have lots and lots of sticks of chewing gum. So you get the hit of the sugar, and then you get another hit of the sugar. Whereas a proper not proper, but house music or traditional dance music, pre-EDM dance music would flow, but there's no room, there's no time for that. So it's got to keep on hitting it, and the problem with that is that the problem with mobile phones is that, especially in Ibiza, if you go to Ushuaia or places like that, you'll find DJs dropping these EDM tracks, and it's pretty obvious when the drop's going to come. So, everybody gets their phones out. Then all the dry ISO cannons will come down. Lasers will go on. Pyrotechnics will go off. The track drops. Everybody gets their 30 seconds. Then they look at it, put it back in the pocket, and then they go back to the bar and have another drink. And then they'll post that. Here I am watching David Guetta in Ushuaia, and it looks amazing. It does look amazing. But, that's not living in the moment, is it?
No, they're recording the experience rather than living it, really.
Yeah, and I think EDM just makes that too easy, and it caters for that market. So they're the three things, I think, to answer your question.
Just a comment from Kenny O'Connor, who I need to thank for setting up this.
Hi Kenny.
Who's part of the Solo Ravers and a good friend of mine. He's active with me in a couple of things, and I am going raving with him to the Orange Party in May, which I'm really looking forward to, and it's going to be like going back to school almost. But
well, Kenny will look after you. I'm sure he'll look after you.
Quick question from one of my regulars: could this be made into a movie? I assume he's talking about your book. And is there going to be an audio version of your book, if there isn't already?
Okay, so the first question is it going to be made into a movie? Increasingly, people are saying it'd make a great film, it'd make a great movie. It's not for me to do it. I'm not capable of writing a screenplay. It's a different kettle of fish. The long form, 120,000 words or whatever, telling stories, anecdotes. I can do that. I can write flyer copy, but screenplay is a different thing. So it needs someone to write a screenplay. Yeah. And so if the film rights are available, so if somebody comes in and makes an offer on the film rights, then fine. But my agent and I talk to them. So it'd be nice if it was a film. I think I'm honoured and humbled by people that say it would make a really good film, because obviously they can see in their heads what goes on, the comedy aspect of it, and also the historical aspect of it. So it'd be great if it was a film. As regards the audiobook, yeah, I'm glad you asked that, Keith. That's a really good question. I really cared about the audiobook. I said to my agent, sorry, my publisher, about this time last year, I said, oh, by the way, I said, is there going to be an audiobook? And he said, yeah, it's going to be an audiobook. I said, oh, fantastic. I said, who's going to be reading it? And he looked at me and he went, well, who do you want to read it? I said, oh, I think Danny Dyer would be really good. And he goes, oh, you do? I said, yeah. And he goes, well, that's not going to happen because we haven't got the budget for that. I said, oh, right. So I guess it's just going to be like a voiceover artist or an actor, is it? He went, no, we haven't got the budget for that. You're going to do it.
Right.
I was like, me? And because I've got tinnitus, I don't listen to I haven't got headphones. I don't listen to amplified music because of all the punk rock and rave that I've listened to. I've got tinnitus in my ears. And so I thought, oh, bloody hell, I've never heard an audiobook, right? I've never even heard an audiobook. I like to record my own audiobook. And so I did a crash course. I've joined Audible, which is brilliant. Yeah. And I rediscovered it. And I think it's a purest form of storytelling. And I lay in bed at night, and either Alan McGee from Creation Records or Bob Mortimer or Bono, they'll tell me their stories, tell me their life story. And it's wonderful because you don't have to deal with punctuation or grammar or comprehension, or deal with a person's dyslexia reading it, or my semi-dyslexia in terms of writing it. All of those things are out. It's just pure storytelling. It's me narrating the story and you listening to it. And I thought the publishers, I said to them, I really want to put sound design on this, because for a raver to be listening, you know, I can describe what it's like to be stood in a field in sunrise pretty well, actually. I can describe at 2 o'clock in the morning to hear the distant thud of the kick drum in the still summer night air, and you could hear the excitement crackling on the atmosphere. I can do that, but if you put a underneath it, that's twice as effective, because we've all got these memories, these electronic emotional memories. And I knew that the people that really like reading my book or listening to my book, it would really resonate with them to hear those kind of things.
Yeah, that would be very cool, actually.
Yeah. So I battled, and the credit where credit's due, they said, look, send us some demos. I sent them 3 demos, and every time I sent them a demo, I said, music's too loud, it detracts from your voice. But I wouldn't give up on it. So we give them a 3rd demo. This one, the music was a bit lower. And they went, okay, you really believe in this, don't you? I said, yeah. I said, okay, you can do it, but don't do it as much as you wanted to do it. Just do it in those passages where you think it would really work. And so I've done it like 15, 16 times in the book. And sound design comes in just sometimes for 30 seconds or just for 1 or 2 minutes, and then goes out again. I'm so pleased with the way the audiobook has turned out. I worked really hard on it with a guy called Matt Ward, who I'd insisted on recording at his studio down in Newton Abbot in Devon, where I live. They offered the chance for me to go up to London and do it in their studio. I wanted to record it with my man, who's a DJ who understands dance music culture.
Yeah, good.
And so I did it with him, and it's great. I've been really vindicated. The sales are fantastic. It's about 35-40% of my entire sales, which is incredible, because usually an audiobook is only sort of 10 to 15%. Mine's double that, which shows that people are really liking it. And I get feedback from people every few days. Someone says, I was listening to your audiobook in the car today, or I was one swimmer. There's a swimmer, like she should be an Olympic swimmer, and she swims for like an hour every morning. And she listens to my audiobook when she's under the blinking swimming pool, swimming under the water, which is incredible. So yeah, there is an audiobook, Keith. It's available on Audible, and there's a couple of extra chapters in there that's not in the hardback, including one about the KLF. So if you're interested in KLF, you'll see an interview there with some guy that worked with the KLF, who's never spoken to the media before. As a 17-year-old boy, he went to Jura, the Isle of Jura, and he drove the KLF around for a week. And he's told me the story for the first time, which is on the audiobook.
I read the extra chapter that you sent me, and I think the moral of that lesson, without giving anything away, is don't scream in an empty nightclub before checking if there's a dog sleeping first.
Did you read it?
I did. Of course I did. I read everything you sent me. Keith, who is blind, said you've got an excellent voice that he could listen to for hours. I don't know quite how you want to take that, but I think
that means so much, because the conversation I was saying earlier, when they said, I said, who's going to do the audiobook? And they said, well, you are. And I went, me? And they went, yeah, what's wrong with that? And I said, I've got a horrible voice. I've got, they said, well, your voice isn't too bad. I said, no, I really hate my voice. Everyone doesn't like the sound of their own voice. I don't like the sound of my voice. Genuinely, honestly speaking, on my children's lives.
I'm the same. Your voice is actually identical to a guy called Chris Jones, who runs the London Screenwriters Festival. And if you listen to any recordings of his, and there are loads online, his voice is the same as yours. You're also got quite a similar voice to the actor Danny Webb as well, who's from Northampton originally. Wow. Dan Candy, who's one of my regulars, says he doesn't normally do audiobooks, but this one sounds cool. He might pick it up. I've actually, you've already sold 2 copies, because 2 of my other regulars who couldn't make the stream tonight just looked at the links that I'd put up online, and they already put that they'd ordered a copy of your book. So,
do you know what's amazing about it is that there's a huge generation of us out there, and the biggest, people say to me, because the book is, I guess it's successful, and they say, no, how do you feel? And you must be really proud or chuffed or anything. And I say the overriding thing is relief. I'm just relieved that people who are around there that time say to me, it's brought back all those memories. You've really captured it. You finally captured, someone's really captured what we were feeling at the time. It took me right back. It's brilliant. And that is just, it's such a relief, because I thought, blimey, if people don't like it, it's going to be horrible, because it wasn't written to be published. It wasn't, I'm not a published author, this is my first book.
Yeah, you wrote it for yourself originally.
Myself and my sons. I wrote it pressed in lockdown, because I was screaming at the television, and I thought I might make myself a bit better by writing down all those anecdotes that I've spun over the years. And I know that work, people like those stories. And so I just started writing the anecdotes down, and then I decided to, as I got to 20,000 words, I thought, oh, this could turn into a book, but who am I going to write it for? And I thought, well, it's not going to get published, because I'm not known. I'm not a DJ, a famous DJ or a promoter or anybody or an actor. And so I just thought, I'll write it for my sons. And so I wanted my sons to know what I did before I became their dad.
Sure.
And I just thought they might find it on a USB in a drawer or something after I died. And to my horror, it's been published, and it's like, now they can, I've given them a copy. Neither of them have read it. I've given them a copy, and I've dedicated the book to them. But other parents have contacted me to say that they've left it hanging around and said, oh, I've just read this book. What this bloke did, it just sums up me and your dad when we used to go courting. And so they leave it around for their teenagers to read, which I think is really cool.
Well, DJ from Zagreb has said hello from Zagreb. Brilliant. Tuning in. I don't think I've had somebody watch the channel from Zagreb before.
Well, Croatia's mentioned, the Undercity raves are mentioned in the book. My car with a guy called Dinko Bazadona and Damir Kurasic, 2 big rave promoters out there. We took rave to Croatia. I explained how that happened in the book, and there's some links on my website from Croatia as well. So I've got a lot of love for Zagreb and for Zlatogrog beer. So, big shout out to everybody out in Zagreb in Croatia.
Well, look, I'm going to wrap it up there with one final question. And I thank you so much for staying a bit longer than we said. I really appreciate it. This has been great. We could have talked for another 2 hours.
Well, you said this was going to happen. You said this.
I said it flies by like that with every guest. I mean, the first AD from the 3 Back to the Future films, David McGiffert, he stayed on for like 3 hours and on Father's Day. And I kept saying, Dave, we've been on for quite a while now. Just let me tell you this one last story. Hey, man, and that's all good.
Kenny goes, well, Lancelot's really good questions. You'll really enjoy it. He was right.
He's very kind. I do seem to have a bit of a knack for this. I should have done it years ago.
Yeah.
What I've noticed, and of course I've embraced this myself by, I'll see if I can find you an appropriately embarrassing photo, by going to events. There's a rise in the last 5, 6, maybe 10 years even of clubbing events aimed at the older generation, aimed at people like myself and your good self who went clubbing when they were younger, and kind of want to recapture a bit of that magic. I mean, I regularly go to Age Against the Machine. I've had the guys on the channel before. Here we are at one of their parties. There with my good friends Chris and Julie, and Marley. You know, there is a big rise in these events. There's another one I'm going to called I haven't stopped dancing yet. I'm looking at a couple of 90s ones, and these are aimed at people that are over 30 or 35. There's even one event that's aimed at people over 40. Do you think are we you know, and I'm trying to be hard on myself here, do you think as the older generation we're constantly seeking to capture the magic of the lost weekends of our youth? Or is this just something that's good for our mental health? You know,
well, the answer to the answer to is one question basically. I think we all yearn for a simpler time, a more innocent time when we perhaps didn't have so many responsibilities, where we lived in the moment, where we weren't worried about world war, pandemics, mortgage payments, interest rates, and all of those kind of things. So I think it's completely natural to want to go back there, and the music is the thing that is one of the most recollective senses. You know, audible, your ears, along with your nose, are the two senses that are most recollect. So I mean, when I hear a Ramones song, I'm 16 again. You know, when I hear the intro to Frankie Knuckles, you know, I walk out to it on the spoken word show. I walk out, you know, the shivers got my spine. Suddenly I'm back in that warehouse or that farmer's field in 1989. And, you know, that's what I wanted to capture in the audiobook. So, yeah, I think there's a huge amount of that going on with people going out there. And in fact, I play for a thing called Big Fish, Little Fish, which is the top family rave. And they've got a great strapline, actually. So for 2 to 4 hour people. So it's only on for between 2 and 4 hours in the afternoon. And people take their kids along. So it's like a family rave. You could take your you've got to be underage or something like that. And so I'm going to be doing some talks for there, because I do some fun aspects to it. I do a thing called Have I Got Acid House News for You? And I do some misheard dance lyrics and things like that, which are quite sort of light-hearted, which I can do. So, yeah, there's a huge rise in those daytime raves. I know the solos, solo group, name checking Julia, Samantha, and Alan, and Kenny and Dan. The solos, you know, they kind of embody them person. They kind of personify that older people going, you know what, we still want to go out on a Saturday and still want to have it, but we still want to be back but by 10:30 to watch Match of the Day. And so, you know, they go do those kind of things. And I think that, you know, BBC have cottoned onto it now, this whole rise of the daytime rave, and which makes a lot more sense. We've been doing it in Ibiza for years. Daytime clubbing has been huge in Ibiza since before the pandemic. You know, people would much rather go out during the day than stay out all night, because if you're going to pay all that money, you know, you don't want to be in bed all day and not get a suntan, you know, especially with the weather so awful. So people now in Ibiza, the daytime raves, you know, Ibiza Rocks, the 528, you know, there's the old abandoned zoo, Ocean Beach, Ushuaia, these are all Bora Bora, these are all daytime events happening that people go to. And it's obviously, again, affected by Instagram, because you could go out there at 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock in the afternoon, and you go like this, and you're kind of absolutely fantastic. You know, if you've seen any picture of us back in the day at 4 o'clock in the morning in a nightclub, you know, we look terrible, you know, and because it's the image. And so that's another attraction for daytime clubbing.
Yeah. All right. Well, Kirk, just want to thank you for coming on and giving up your Monday night. It's been wicked. I hope to meet you in the flesh in the not too distant future.
Yeah, I mean, I'm doing something up in London. Thank you, Lance, for your time and your interest, and anyone else that's tuned in tonight. I do some spoken word shows. I do a little bit of this and talking and things. And that all the dates will be on my website from next week. But the paperback's coming out in early June, so I will be doing a lot more shows and festivals in the summer from May, June, July onwards. So I look forward to seeing people there, and I sign books and answer questions. And it's pretty much, it reflects the balance of the book. It's some humor, it's some history, and some hedonism. The 3 H's.
Well, hopefully, when your second book is coming up for release, we can have you back.
Yeah, let's meet.
We barely touched on the kind of the whole holiday thing. We mentioned it briefly. I just wanted to get it in there, but we barely touched on it really. I think we could do another one of these to plug your second book when it comes out.
There are a lot of stories in there, and also there's two or three chapters that didn't get in the first book that we have just moved over to. There's loads and loads of stories. There's one called White Noise, about 20,000 words, about loads of stories about kissing the snow, snow bombing, British snowboard championships, all of those kind of holidays that I do, the clubbing holidays in the snow that I've done. So many brilliant stories there that are still yet to be told.
Well, I look forward to reading and hearing about those. So thanks to Kirk for coming on. Thanks to everyone for your comments in the chat. Do like and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. I've got heaps of stuff coming up this month, actually. So I do a regular weekly chat show every Tuesday. So tomorrow night at 10 o'clock, it's late, so I capture my American crowd as well, called the Nielsen Ratings. We'll be talking about all the latest stuff we've seen. We'll be talking about June Part 2 mainly tomorrow. On Wednesday, we're doing a special on Shogun, the new series of Shogun, which, Kirk, if you're a fan of the book or the original one with Richard Chamberlain, the new version of Shogun is amazing. 10 out of 10. Really? Yeah. Worth your time. You can watch it on Disney Plus. And then we're doing we've got two special events coming up in March on the channel. On the 31st of March, I'm doing 5 days at Memorial, which is on Apple Plus. It's the true story of the Memorial Hospital in Hurricane Katrina. I've got two of the cast coming on to talk to us about the show. It's one of the best dramas you'll ever see. It's a 6-parter, absolutely amazing piece of television. And then slightly more lighthearted on Sunday, the 24th of March, we've got the cast of The Thing the Musical featuring Muppets. And it's a bit of a comedy parody stream, but we've got the producer coming on. We've got Muppet guest characters coming on, including one of the cast himself, Richard Dreyfuss, as he's known. So I'm looking forward to doing that, especially I think even there might be a song or two from the movie itself. And if you don't believe me, there you go. There's a still from the film. So looking forward to doing that. That's going to be absolutely brilliant. All right. So Kirk, thanks ever so much, mate. And if you've ever got anything you want to give a plug to, please just come back on the channel. For those people watching, thanks very much for your time. Like I always say at the end of my streams, don't forget to keep in touch with the people that you care about. Pick up the phone occasionally and tell them that you love them. And we will see you again real soon.
See ya. Bye.